Welcome to the Boss It Weekly podcast, a no-nonsense, no-hype, frank and close-up analysis of what is currently working and what is not in the world of software. The Boss It podcast is packed with major takeaways for software business owners and managers. So, let's begin.
And another Boss It podcast. Well, today we've got a very shy, retiring sort of chap. I don't know how he's going to get on with talking on this podcast. It might be a little bit of an ordeal. Well, I'm only joking, actually. It is Michael Trigg. He's the Presentation Maestro. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I've worked with Michael a number of times. We've actually been on we've sort of shared a stage. We've spoken to groups of people together. I've recommended you to a number of people. I've read your book as well.
Well, have you looked at my app, Mark?
I've seen, yes, I have. Yes, I remember you talking to me about that. And I was really fascinated by that. Just give yourself a quick intro. Tell people what it is that you do precisely. Because I think when we talk about presentations, and, you know, I called you the Presentation Maestro, a lot of people may start thinking PowerPoint and slides and design. But it's much more than that, isn't it?
Well, it is, Mark. Thank you very much. Yes, I think you're right. When you say the word presentation to most people, the first thing they think about is PowerPoint and design. And actually, it's the very last thing you think about, PowerPoint design. And what I do is I show people and encourage people to be absolutely crystal clear in their message, to be down to earth, to be human, to be natural, and authentic. Yes. And let the real them come out to play. And I think that all of us instinctively engage with somebody when they're being clear and when they're being authentic. So that's what I do.
Absolutely. And you've got, I remember when I first met with you, I thought your background was very relevant. You know, you've had wide experience. You've worked in 9 different countries. You've worked with lots of different organizations of all sizes. Mm-hmm. You've been in investment banking. You served in the army for 5 years, which is always good, gives you discipline. You worked for 6 years at Procter & Gamble, and you've worked in the technology sector. Yeah, really good background. And I think that's one of the things that I always look out for, is somebody that's got that wide-ranging experience that you can pull upon, especially when you're providing the sort of assistance that you do.
Well, it's been a useful and broad background. And I suppose a strong streak of common sense running through it all. But it's one of my philosophies. I'm not really interested in theory so much. I like things that work, that are practical, and that can be useful. And that my programs and my coaching is full of that. There's nothing that's theoretical. It all works. Absolutely.
How much do you think that your own voice has helped you in your success?
My own voice? Yes. Goodness.
You've got a good voice for podcasts.
Well, so a lot of people say I sound like Roger Moore of late, so I'll take that.
That's good.
And some people are very kind about quite a lot of people are very kind about my voice. I mean, the short answer is, well, I haven't a clue. I don't think it's got in my way at all.
No.
But actually, when I was working for Procter & Gamble and I was climbing around Tesco storerooms and things, then it did work against me. What's a bleeding posh git doing like you doing in our industry? Just trying to do a job, really. So it has worked against me in the past. But normally, it's okay.
Yes, I couldn't imagine it going down so well, perhaps on a building site somewhere.
Well, having been a soldier, it's not an issue for me and not an issue for most people. But it's just some people have a bee in their bonnet about it, but it very rarely happens. I'm glad to say.
I think it's good. And I once met somebody, you may have come across him actually. It was the Institute of Directors. I was there was a talk happening, and his role was around being an English gentleman. He used to help coach people about being an English gentleman. And he said, English have actually got a really good brand, but they don't use it well enough. And he said he will often go into organizations and teach them about etiquette and good manners in different situations. And he made a really good living from that. And the first time I met you, I thought of this chap. I could see there were similarities. I could see you doing the same. Perhaps it's a sideline you might start up later.
Well, there's an idea for a sideline.
Yeah. Anyway, let's start out by talking about, and I want to join in with this because I think it's a really important topic.
Yeah.
Is the power of being able to present yourself, not necessarily with slides. It can be that you get the opportunity to speak to a group of people. How important is being able to talk and present in a business setting?
Well, your listeners would probably say, well, it would say this, wouldn't he? But let me just wind it back again. Let me put it in perspective. Is that I fervently believe in my core of my being that it is probably the single biggest differentiator between you and your competition. Because the more look around out there, very few organizations have got a unique selling proposition. There's a few, and there's Apple, and there's Tesla, and a few others you can find, but very few of them do. I mean, show me one bank that's really any different to another, one insurance company, etc. They've got the same sort of people, they offer the same sort of services. I think the one thing when you're meeting a client for the first time, or maybe the second time, the biggest thing that differentiates you from the others is if you could demonstrate how well you get them, how clear you are, how human you are, how unlike a robot you are. I think that really, because if there's two people in front of a potential client, two choices or three choices they have to make. Actually, let me illustrate this with an anecdote. I was working with a branding agency a few years ago, and there's a young guy in the program who, and I've never forgotten this story, and he must have been 25, 26, and he said, look, I must tell you this, Michael. I went to see a potential client earlier in the week, and I was 3 minutes into my spiel, and the client stuck his hand up and said, stop! And the young guy said, oh, God, I've blown it. And the potential client said, don't worry. He said, you haven't blown it. He said, I know you can do the job. And I know the other 4 agencies I'm seeing this week can do the job. What I'm here to decide is, do I want to work with you for the next 2 or 3 years?
Yes.
And I think that puts all of it in a good context. And so I think it is absolutely vital that one is good at presenting yourself and your business and your company and what you do.
And the important word there is presenting yourself.
Yes.
Presenting your true self. I see, and we spoke briefly before we started the recording today, that I've seen too often people who try to present in a stereotypical way that they believe is the right way, that isn't them. Or they've been taught to present in a certain way, very much a sort of a template version, and you can see it isn't the genuine person. And that comes across. People are very perceptive when it comes across to, is this person genuine? Are they telling me the truth? Can I trust them? Those things are more important, I believe, because when people are going to make a decision, decisions are fundamentally, most of the decision is about an emotional decision. Do I trust this person? Would I want to work with them? And then they'll back it up with a little bit of logic at the end. But they've got to like you. They've got to want to do business with you. Mark,
I agree. I mean, apparently all of our decisions are taken emotionally, and then we justify it afterwards with logic. Yeah. Absolutely. And there are a lot of, I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people look at a certain example or model of how to do it and model that. That's how Bill Gates does it, that's how Steve Jobs does it, etc. They're not always good models at all.
No.
At all. And I think we were talking earlier about, let's say, someone like Steve Jobs, and there's been a book written by a guy called Colleen Gallo on the presentation secrets of Steve Jobs, etc. And people try and emulate that, pacing up and down all over the place. Well, I don't actually think Steve Jobs was a very good presenter, and his successor, Tim Cook, certainly isn't. And in my professional opinion. But the reason they can get away with it, pacing up and down, which is something nearly all people who are given a stage tend to do.
Mm.
They pace back and forth. They say, give a senior guy or woman a stage, and they pace up and down it. It's actually bloody irritating. And it really is. But they say, oh, Steve Jobs does it. Well, the reason Steve Jobs does it is because he was Steve Jobs, and Tim Cook is the chief executive of Apple. Yes. And frankly, he could be wearing a pink tutu, riding a motorcycle, juggling balls. You'd still listen because they have position power.
Yes.
They have, and they also make some of the sexiest kit on the planet. Therefore, you will listen.
Yes, that's true.
But most of us do not have that position power.
No.
And looping right back to one of the things you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast about PowerPoint and design, if you think of some of the people who most of your listeners will recognize as good presenters, and I'll try and be as broad as I can. Let's say, Mandela or Martin Luther King or Churchill or even, David Cameron or Boris Johnson or Tony Blair. From
JFK.
You name it.
Yep.
JFK. One thing they have in common is that they didn't use PowerPoint.
Yes.
And yet everybody these days reaches for PowerPoint first thing. And the reason they do most of the time is, A, they've been taught wrongly. Secondly, they need it as their crutch to keep on track and to get their point across. Now, sometimes it's very useful to use, and I've seen you use it very, very well. But most of the time, it's a crutch. And if you take that crutch away, if you literally pull the plug out the side of the PC or the Mac, they're screwed.
Yes.
And one of the things that I do is I show my clients a way of installing what they want to say in their head so that everything comes out in the right order and the right sequence, and they forget nothing. But more importantly, it allows the real them to come out to play. And once they realize that it works, they realize they had this sort of, it's like a titanium steel safety net underneath them. Once they realize it won't let them down, then the real them really does come out to play, and their authenticity comes out to play and shows.
My pet hate, and I've said this to many, many people, is presentations that have bullet-pointed sentences on a slide, and they read them to the audience.
I know.
Why are you doing that? I'm assuming that all of your audience can read, and what you're then doing is they're reading it and they're listening to you at the same time, and they're probably reading at a different rate to you are, and you're just sending in mixed data to their heads and confusing them. It's terrible.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, actually, think of that. If I just give an example, I've just pulled up in front of me on my Mac a text I got back from a client of mine. He was a senior partner in a consulting organization, actually consulting to the pharmaceutical world. And a couple of years ago, he had to give a major presentation in Amsterdam, I think it was, to industry heads. They were chief executives of bloody big pharma companies and competition. And a lot was riding on this. And we worked for a couple of, about 3 sessions together. And he used a minimum of PowerPoint. And this was the text after. He said, Mr. Trigg, the score's on the doors. 2 new clients asked if I would go and meet their boss. The organizers asked me to present at their US event. 1 competitor congratulated me, observing that I must do this often. And another offered me a job. Not a bad day at the lending library, really. But
Fantastic.
That's the power, really, of letting the real you come out to play if you are clear.
Yes.
And the trouble is, I've observed that about 90, I'd say over 90, maybe 95% of most presentations, be they selling or pitching or informative, do not have a message.
Yes.
They have a sort of subject here, but they don't have a message, and they're not clear.
No.
But when all the planets align, you are clear, crystal clear. You've got a damn good structure. You know where you are. Your client or your audience know where you are, or your viewers these days know where you are. And you are not relying on PowerPoint as your crutch. Magic like the one I've just read out to you happens.
Yes. Interesting what you said about PowerPoint, because I'm quite a fan of TED Talks, especially when they first came out. There were some fantastic talks on there.
Yes, absolutely.
And the TED Talk that I believe is still the most popular ever was by a chap from the education sector in the UK,
Ken Robinson.
Ken Robinson, and he
Yes.
didn't use a single slide. He walked out onto stage, he stood still, he looked the audience in the eye, and he was brilliant. If you haven't heard, I believe he's done several TED Talks.
He has.
Look up
And
Ken
I've seen
Robinson.
at least a couple of them. He is superb. Absolutely superb.
Very clear, he's entertaining, and it's him. It's natural.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's got this wonderful wit. He looks quite unprepossessing as he comes on because he's, as you may remember, he's, I think, got a club foot or something.
That's right. Yes, he has. Yes.
Yeah, and he stood absolutely still. But a little thing about this movement around, it's fascinating, is that if you consider Disney, the world of Disney, very, very successful company, going from strength to strength to strength, and all of us have seen Disney movies and cartoons and loved them.
Yes.
And if you look, they use archetypes all the time, as most good storytellers do. And if you look at their serious, not necessarily the serious, but the goody in the cartoons, or the goody character, or the serious character.
Yes.
Do they move around a lot, unless they're running away from somewhere? Answer, no. Are they quite still a lot of the time? Yes.
That's really interesting.
And if you look at the comedic characters, be they the chipmunks or the meerkats or something, do they move around a lot? Yes.
Yes.
Do they move around fast? Yes. And we cannot help but identify unconsciously with those archetypes looking at somebody on stage, and they're pacing up and down. And if they happen to be talking rather fast as well, what our unconscious brain goes is chipmunk.
Yes.
The guy's a goddamn chipmunk.
We communicate so much by the way that we present ourselves, by our movement, by body language. And
hugely.
I see so often, not just people strolling around on stage, is people rocking backwards and forward, where they take a pace forward and a pace back.
Yes.
And what that does is it's conveying an uneasiness. And I think when somebody can look and can see that you're feeling uneasy, it makes the audience uneasy, and it's not a pleasant experience.
You're absolutely right. Behavior breeds behavior, and we do pick it up, and the body always speaks first. There's a lot of tosh written about body language, to be honest with you. It's a lot more complex than most books written about it actually cover. But you're right. We pick up on this. It's instinctive. And to get the presenter comfortable, they need to do the spade work beforehand, but to get them into a state that they feel comfortable in what they're talking about, and they feel comfortable in themselves. And use that phrase I've used before, to let the real them come out to play.
Yes.
Does put the audience at ease and makes them, helps them want to listen. And of course, we're talking about stage and things like that now. I mean, most communication for some time to come, communicating, particularly commercially, is going to be online. It's going to be on Zoom and Microsoft Teams and everything else, where you don't have the option of moving around. But there are many other slips between cup and lip when you're presenting and talking online. It's a different set of skills.
Yes, I've had. I've always had lots of conference calls because we deal internationally, and you can't always meet face to face. And most often there's an audio element. It's amazing how often people seem to forget that you're also being watched. So I've seen just in the last few weeks, there was a company presentation. There was about 4 or 5 senior executives from another company that were watching and listening.
Yes.
And 2 of the executives were answering email, sending text messages, just not paying attention.
Which is what they do in real life anyway.
It's yes.
At the table.
If only you could see yourselves and how bad this looks. I also did. I was on a webinar where they had enabled. It was unusual. I couldn't understand why. They'd enabled the visual side of the presentation. So you had the person giving the presentation, but then you could see the audience, of which there was probably about 30 companies. So along the top of the bar, I could see all of these people sitting at their desk. and the presentation started, and the people were sitting there, and you didn't, you're looking, but you obviously could see the presentation, but you could see these people. And as the presentation continued, one by one, they got up and walked away. And in the end, I could probably see about 8. I didn't flick along any further. All 8 of them had left. This guy was presenting regardless. And it wasn't, it was amusing in one respect, but it was off-putting. It really was.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think you've got to be just a bit more aware of should we say, follow your P's and Q's when you're online, and to treat it as such. A couple of little tips, if you like, or examples. You mentioned earlier on, about a minute ago, about there being seen, but actually, funnily enough, on video, online, on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meets,
yes,
sound, and on videos anyway, sound is actually more important than the visual.
Yes.
People will put up with a grainy picture, but they won't put up with shitty sound.
True.
Which is why an awful lot of people going online stick their cans on their head or have their mobile leads. Now, that's okay. You get better sound from that. But if you make the leap over to, if you were having a real conversation with somebody, a real presentation, would you like to present to them? Or would you like them to present to you when you have your AirPods in? You'd think, you'd stop and you go, no, would you mind taking those out so I can continue?
Yes.
And just a simple little thing like that, you make yourself visually much more appealing if you actually get a decent, 25, 30 quid from Amazon, get a decent microphone that sits on your desk if you're using a desktop or a laptop, because most desktops and laptops have pretty shitty microphones. Just get a one so you can look at the screen, look at them unencumbered with anything in your ears. And another thing about presenting online, which most of your listeners will be doing and will have to do for some time, is the eye contact part. Now, most of us will look at the screen, the middle of the screen, and look at the people, look at the person who's we're talking to or talking to us. But you're then not looking at the camera.
Yes.
And it's profoundly unintuitive to look at that little black dot at the top of the lid or the screen. But that's where you've got to look if you want to give your viewer, your audience, the sense that you are talking to them.
Yes, absolutely. I've seen that.
It happens nearly all the time. I mean, I had a Zoom call about an hour ago with comms director of one of the biggest companies in Europe. He was communications director, hell of a nice guy, but he never looked at me once. Yes. And he wasn't looking at notes or anything. He was looking at something else way down the screen. And little things like that can make a big difference. Big difference. How
often have you been on a conference call, maybe got a few people involved, and you can hear this? especially when the mic...
Would you mute yourself, please, Mr. Edwards?
Yes. Especially when the mic is coming from the laptop in which they're typing. And they're merrily typing away, and you think, I hope they're taking notes at least to do with this, or are they just answering emails? I mean, it can be very off-putting. But you're absolutely right. It does need to be.
It can be. And the thing is, I mean, some people are well-mannered, some are not. Some don't give a damn. But I would put it back to us, the person who is giving the presentation, even if it's interactive or not. It's your job, it's our job, to engage them enough and to keep them interested. And so you don't get that happening.
Yes.
I mean, some people will always look at their phones. Part of it is boredom. Part of it is bad manners. Part of it is, I've got this really important email, etc. Part of it is showing off how important I am. I need to do this at the same time. Whole mixture of stuff.
Part of it is habit as well. I think that people get so much habitually looking towards their iPhone for the latest message that's popped up. Yes. Most of the time, it's trivial nonsense. Anyway,
you're not going to stop them anyway. They're going to do that.
Yes.
The days are gone when you can say, would you actually put your phones on silent, or most of them will have them on silent, but they'll have them with them. I mean, it's like an umbilical. We're attached to our iPhones, etc. However, they tend to do it less if you're engaging them.
Yes.
And that's the sort of thing I spend my life teaching.
You work with a lot of senior people where, and this is something that where we very much cross over. Senior people within software tech, they need to be seen as these businesses need a figurehead, and that means that they will need to present. They will be asked to present. They perhaps might be asked to talk to video, may get opportunity to speak on stage, and their ability to do that can have a big effect. I remember you told me about an organisation that you worked with, and you worked with them to improve their presentation and speaking confidence, and their share price went up. I mean, that's a clear indication, isn't it?
It is indeed. That was the chief exec and the finance director of an energy company, and they were presenting their half-yearly results to the city, which is nearly a very dull affair.
Yes.
And quite a combative affair. And afterwards, share price went up 10%, and the Telegraph rated it as a buy. Absolutely.
I think that a lot of it is, well, there's a number of different things that play to this. Is sometimes people are not aware that they're not presenting very well. It's sort of the unknown unknowns. And
can I just stop you there for a second?
Yes, go ahead.
I absolutely agree with you. And most people are used to doing it. You reach a certain level in management, and it's part of your job to get on your feet in front of a group, talk to some PowerPoint slides. So people are used to doing it. They're used to standing on their feet and talking to a load of PowerPoint slides. But that doesn't mean they're presenting. They're just standing, delivering some guff.
Yes.
So I think you're right. A lot of them are just not aware that it's important. And I'll be honest with you. If you go to the high levels of academia, I've been to the London Business School 3 times, the world's premier business school, and said, this is what we do. And they said, well, like the cut of your jib, and I'm not quite sure how we can use you. And I said, well, to be honest with you, you have here, as part of your alumni, in your halls at the moment, you have the future chief executives of most of the Fortune 500. And it's an absolutely crucial leadership ability to be able to present well. They go, well, they're bright people and they get a bit of this at university, which they don't. And they're just, even there, the people who run business schools, it's not on their radar. But having said that, I've done some work with the side business school in Oxford, and it was a bit of a sausage machine. I think I had 12 groups in a day of, they gave me half an hour. That's all with, the entrepreneur, the MBA program. The very next day, they were going to present to a board of part of the faculty, and part of them were entrepreneurs as well. Yeah. And I thought, crikey, what I would do with sort of 8 or 10 people per time in half an hour. But I managed to refocus on how to start and how to get the attention. Yes. And they absolutely loved it. They sucked it up something rotten. And one of them since was inviting me out when he joined and helped found a company in Switzerland. He invited me out to work with them there. But a lot of people are not aware. You're absolutely right. And of how mediocre stroke dire they can be.
Part of my job when I'm working with my client and I'm not doing my job is to actually highlight that. That can be quite difficult because the senior people within their organization, they probably haven't got that many people around who are going to say, sorry, but that's really awful.
Well, do you know what? A company it was a big data company. One of the biggest, I believe, based in the States. And I started working with the English subsidiary based in London. And when I started there wasn't one person in senior management, not one, who was willing to get on the stage and say, hey, this is what we do. Come and talk to us. Not one. And, of course, that message goes down the organization so that the others say, oh, well, the bosses are avoiding doing this. Yes. I can avoid it too.
Wow. Yes, that's terrible message, isn't it?
It was extraordinary.
I once had a group of senior people, and I took them out of the room and asked them to come back in one by one and just for 30 to 90 seconds present their company. And one of the executives there, I won't mention who it was, became really annoyed at me. Really annoyed. And they said afterwards, that was really unfair. You didn't give me any presentation time for that. And I said, but you've been running that business for 10 years. How much more time do you need?
Well, I love that. And I couldn't cap your story, Mark. I wouldn't dream of it. But I would just
You will. I know you will.
A parallel one. I knew of a company who had a media training studio in Grosvenor Street, just opposite Claridge's. And the great and the good used to come there to be groomed for their, if I can use that word, prepared for their annual speech at the AGM or what have you. And one chief executive came one day, or chairman, and he watched the playback in the green room afterwards. And apparently he said, I knew I was good. But I didn't know I was that good.
Really?
And they had to say, well, actually, sir, you're crap. Yeah. And one of my clients, again, remain nameless, but it was a big company. I never got to work with him, but the chairman was so dire that every time he opened his mouth in a public setting into the press, the share price went down 50 pounds.
Well, yes, that's not great, is it? Really? keep him out of the media because we can't afford it for people to see him.
I know. But you try keeping someone with a big ego out of the media. He's difficult.
I had a client, and this is not that long ago. Again, to preserve the blushes of the innocent here, I won't mention any names. But a new client, and I asked him. I knew quite a lot about their business before we engaged, but I asked him just how he would present his company. I said, just a couple of minutes, just present it to me. Well, I stopped him after 30 minutes because I just couldn't stand it. I thought, how long will he continue talking? And I hadn't said a word. I just sat there and listened, and I stopped him after 30 minutes. And I thought, this is incredible. So I brought across two of my colleagues independently, and I said, could you just present? Now, these are guys that have been in the industry decades in the software sector. And he presented to them, and it went on and on. And I had to stop it in the end. It just went on and on and on and on. And afterwards, I said to them both, I said, what was your impression of this business? And they both said, I haven't a clue. Didn't understand what he said.
Yeah.
It was just, when it was torture anyway, but it went on and on and on and on till you get to this stage where it's just total confusion.
Yeah.
And I had to tell him, that's not just poor, that's terrible. You're not even close. You're not communicating. There is no communication there. No. And I think the problem with that is if the opportunity, no matter how nice a guy is, if the opportunity to meet with him again, if we were prospects, how likely are they to want to meet with him again?
No.
You just wouldn't.
No, you wouldn't. Or you'd have several Red Bulls before you go in.
So is that how you start with your clients? Do you start with an assessment? I mean, or do you just sort of look forward?
No, great question. I do start with an assessment, if you like. One of the first things we do together is I get them, either online or face-to-face, whichever way we're working. I get to do a short presentation to me, and I film it, of how they are at the moment, should we say, the starting point. And so before I play it back to them, we talk about several things, and I say some of the things that you might do and consider looking at. Then we play it back. And I very rarely had someone say, yeah, that's really good. Yeah, fantastic. They all go, oh, God, yeah, you're right. So there are gentler ways of, should we say, putting the boot in and making them realize. But yeah, I do, because then we both have the evidence. Yes. So this is how you are right now, and this is what you can do differently. And most of the time, to be honest with you, Mark, they are picking it up. They're saying, oh, God, I'm doing this. I'm going to do it. It's often I have to say, okay, yeah, sure, I changed that, but you're doing this well. You're doing that well. Yes. Maybe. So getting them to notice the things they're doing well, as well as the things to improve.
Yeah.
But you mentioned
Sorry, I was going to say how much of your job is about helping them with their confidence in presenting, because I think that's so important.
It's interwoven everywhere within it. I don't do specific confidence building exercise, of which I have a trunkload of. But I find the best way of people developing as a presenter is for it to grow organically within inside. And it's my job really to give them the tools and the ways of thinking that allows them to do that, and the experience of using them, which allows it. And once they realize that the things I show them work, and they work, I have to say, phenomenally well, and they, oh God, this works under fire. It works when I'm under pressure, and it works when I'm nervous, and it works when I'm shitting myself.
Yes.
Once they realize that builds confidence in a way that isn't the big egotistical I am. It's more along the self-worth, the self-esteem side, which is sort of gentler. And you're absolutely right. Building confidence is shot through pretty well everything I do. But I just want to whip back to something you said earlier about communication. It's one of my wonderful thing that George Bernard Shaw said. He said, and it's so applicable. He said the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Yes, that's very good. I like that. I've not heard that before, but I'll be using that one.
Please do.
Yeah,
please do.
That's so true.
Yeah, isn't it just?
You don't know, and I think particularly in England, because how often do people say, "Sorry, stop! I don't understand what you're talking about," or "What does that abbreviation mean?" I know that's one of your things that you say. Keep away from these sort of cliches and abbreviations.
Oh God,
it happens. I mean, software tech. Some people they talk in abbreviations. Every sentence has to have 3 abbreviations. Why?
But would they talk to their wife like that, or their husband like that, or their boy or girlfriend like that, or to their children like that, or to their mother like that?
I don't know.
They wouldn't.
Absolutely not.
So it's extraordinary how many people, it's not just the tech sector, but I know that's where you largely focus, but
yes,
almost everybody, they can be a normal human being until they get to work. Then they put this hat on, which has the word professional stitched across the top of it.
Absolutely.
And they start using language that a normal human being wouldn't use, under the illusion that it is professional. And it's just daft.
It's the same with copywriting, and you see this in a lot of sort of marketing material and on websites. People go into this strange sort of business lingo that you would never say in talking to a friend or a relative, but yet you feel obliged to use this strange lingo. It is not effective.
But actually what people are crying for is plain English. And I don't mean dumbing down.
No.
But I mean just being eloquent. And if we take, it's a rather extreme example, but Churchill's wartime speeches, particularly in 1940, when we were on our own, for want of a better expression, and things looked pretty dire, he had to inspire and motivate the aristocrat on his grouse moor and the docker in the East End. And he did. And he used words that everybody could understand. Short sentences, old words. I don't mean sort of prithee or zounds or knave, but words that we all have a pretty common idea of what they mean.
You picked on one of my heroes, and I'm just trying to remember. There was a quote about Churchill, was that during the war years, this is not exact, but he summoned up the English language and he sent it out to war. And I just loved that quotation because it's so true. He inspired a nation. And remember also, he had a psychological battle with Adolf Hitler, and Hitler hesitated in attacking the UK, and as a consequence, the nation was able to muster their forces. And I don't think there's ever been an example of one man having more of an effect over a nation's war. I mean, and he used the power of words.
He did indeed. He did indeed. And as a little aside, is that it's hidden. Now, we don't know about it. Most of us have the illusion. We're under the illusion that Chamberlain, his predecessor, was an appeaser and was weak and everything else. But apparently, what happened before, 1938 or 39 or something, the Watson Watt, the invention of radar, and I think the guy who invented the Hawk Hurricane, came to him and said, Prime Minister, whatever you do, buy us time.
Mm-hmm.
We need time. Because at the time, I think we had one radar station and a motley collection of fighters. And that's why, apparently, he prevaricated and went for the meaning agreement, etc. And in the process, destroyed his reputation. So that we did have time.
Yes.
So that come the Battle of Britain, we had functioning radar stations everywhere, but he sacrificed his reputation in doing that. Most people don't know that.
I've just done a quick Google search, and I found out that it was actually President Kennedy talking about Churchill. The actual quote was, he mobilized the English language and he sent it into battle. And he was sort of re-quoting Edward Murrow. But what a great quote. And that's exactly what he did. Yes. He was also a good writer.
Phenomenal writer.
Yeah.
Phenomenal writer.
So you've written a book. You've got an app.
Yes.
Your book is regarding the 13 key secrets of powerful presenting.
That's my first book. And it's actually available from my website, presentationmastro.com. It's a free download.
Right.
The 13 key secrets of presenting. Now, are they secrets? Of course they're not. Nothing's new under the sun. But they could be secrets for the amount that people use them. And so, yes, that anybody can get that. It's also available as a book from Amazon, but no, you can download it free from my website. But my main book is the one I gave you is Blow Your Own Horn.
That's right. Yes. Great title.
And that works, I'm glad to say. And my app, which is free. Sorry, this is a shameless plug, but
go ahead.
But it's not. The book does cost about $10, but the app is free from the Apple and Google App Store. It's called Ovation, as in standing ovation. And there's a lot on there. And actually, funny enough, you mentioned TED Talks earlier on. A guy I hadn't seen for 5 or 6 years, we reestablished contact on LinkedIn last week. And he said, I saw you talk of this networking, but I got your app, and it was really useful and it helped me. I did a couple of TED Talks.
Wow.
And your app really helped before that. So I thought it's really, really kind. So it's a standalone tool. There's no sneaky in-app upsells or anything else, but it's quite a resource if people want to dip into it and get a feeling for my style and, more importantly, use the stuff on there.
Fantastic. I've seen you present. I've seen you talking to people in smaller groups. And one of the things that I remember and I thought was very good, you weren't formulaic in it. You weren't. It wasn't sort of one model that you were pressing upon people. You were listening to the people and you were showing them that there were different ways of being a good presenter, but there were obviously some key principles that they need to bear in mind, and I really like that.
Oh, Mark, I'm so glad you noticed that and said that, but absolutely, because we're all unique. All of us. We all have our own style. There is no one way of doing this. There really isn't. But there, as you say, there's some fundamental principles. And for example, the structure that I shared with you in your groups at the time, no structure's a structure. You can go from A to Z. But the way people use it just sounds different coming out of everybody's mouth. It doesn't sound formulaic and at all. So I'm very glad you picked that up. No, that's important for me too. The last thing I would ever want to do is send out people as a little clones.
Yes.
Of my method, of my way of thinking. It's not. No. That's not the way.
I can provide reassurance of that because I've seen you in action, and I really enjoyed seeing you working. What would be one tip that you could provide to a senior executive about presenting, about being able to communicate verbally, that they could take away from this podcast? Maybe it's something that you've seen as a common mistake or a misunderstanding or a myth. What would be the one takeaway perhaps from this podcast?
Thank you. Well, let me give you more than one, if I may.
Go for it.
In no particular order. I'm not going to give you a whole load, but let's see if I can make do with three. Number one, they're going to be doing it online for a bit. So look at the camera.
Yes.
Look people in the eyes. You can't see yourself look in the eyes because you're looking at this horrible little almost invisible black dot, but look at the camera and
Yes.
have it at eye level. Have it at eye level. That's number one. Number two, have an aim for your presentation. Let the audience know what to expect, what's in it for them.
Yes.
The purpose of this talk is X so that you can go and do Y. State that fairly early on up front. Most talks do not have that. And thirdly, use down-to-earth language.
Yes. Yes.
Do not get mired in customer-centric delivery frameworks and the like. Talk as you would to a friend.
I've started to create a little list of all of these sort of cliched phrases within the software sector, things like best of breed. And I'm trying to illustrate why they're wrong. And for most of them, one really good test, and I'm going to publish this list. I need it to grow a little bit longer. I've probably got about 40 in there at the moment, but I'm going to publish this list. Is always to look at the complete opposite. So people are saying best of breed to try and make themselves seem attractive. But if you think of the opposite, who of your competitors are saying, well, we worked hard and we pick out the worst of the software solutions out there to use? or we believe in being professional and providing a good service. Or we're really experienced. I said, well, the opposite of you saying that, I'm sure none of your competitors are saying, we haven't got any experience at all, but we're going to give it a damn good try. Until your competitors are saying that, there's probably no point in just coming out with these cliches about professional and experience.
Do you know what? I'd probably go for the latter one. I'm going to give it a damn good try, because at least they'll be trying.
Yes,
and they won't be complacent, and they won't have their digit up their backside. And
that could be your new tagline. The Presentation Maestro, I'll give it a damn good try.
Well, I'll give you another tip for this one. It came not from me, from one of my clients. It came one of my open programs, and she was in business development, I think, but she had this most wonderful line. She says, "I have a Darren," and we said, "That's very nice. What's a Darren?" And she said, "Well, in my village where I live, there's a lovely guy called Darren who's a carpenter, and he knows absolutely bugger all about what I do. And every time I have an important presentation to give, I buy him a couple of beers and I sit him down and I give it to him. And he's only got one job. If he notices anything I'm saying that he doesn't understand, he tells me.
Mm-hmm.
And I change it and adapt it so he does understand."
Mm.
And so
it's a good test.
Everybody needs a Darren.
Yes.
The sounding board to bounce people off who aren't in your industry or aren't, intimately involved with what you do, and can they understand it?
Yes. Well, I think you've done a great job today. You didn't need a Darren. I know that everybody's completely understood what you've been talking about today, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. We're at we've gone over 40 minutes, so and I'm sure there won't be much to edit, so it's probably going to be a longer podcast, which is a good sign. So thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you, Mark, for giving me the chance to talking with you on this. It's fantastic.
No, I really enjoyed it. We covered lots of different areas and covered many points that I really enjoyed. And I like your three tips at the end. So this is the Boss It podcast. It's designed to be for software executives, for those of you that are looking to help improve the performance of your business. You want to take it to that next stage. My aim is to be talking to people just like Michael who can provide assistance. It's also to talk to other software entrepreneurs. So if you feel that you could make an interesting podcast, then get in contact with me. Also, if you've got questions or if there are issues that you would like me to address and perhaps reach out and find an expert or perhaps answer the question myself, then please do let me know. But apart from that, thank you very much, Michael, for today, and to all of you. Keep safe, and I'll be speaking to you again soon. Thank you very much.
Keep safe. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.